When I decided to talk about what it means to be an Indian, then I asked, the first thing I did is I went home and I asked my 14-year-old daughter, what do you think? What does it mean to be an Indian? What do you and your friends think? And she looked at me and she said, you've got to be kidding, we don't think about these things. you know. Then I persisted and I said, imagine that it's a school essay and you have to write about what it means to be an Indian. So she looked even more sort of scornfully at me and said, okay, it must be good. We just defeated Australia in a match, And then I sort of thought about this some more. And I went to my office and I asked in the bureau, which I run in a magazine, and I said, guys, what do you think about, does anyone have an idea about being an Indian? I mean, how are we to work with this notion? So there's this lovely woman, and this is a story about women, hormones and nationalism. She's just had a baby. Now when women are pregnant, sometimes the hormones go crazy. So she said, do you ever feel sentimental when you hear patriotic songs? And I said, yes, I do sometimes actually, even though I'm furious with many things that happen in India. So she said, you know what happened to me on this Republic Day? I was watching the parade and when the national anthem and all of this started, she said, I felt like very emotional, teary-eyed. And when the planes took off, I started to cry. She said, I started to bawl. So that was the second idea of sort of exploring this. Now, let me get serious about this whole notion of what it means to me to be an Indian. And I'll tell you a little bit about myself. I am from a mixed background in the sense that my father is a Shia Muslim, my mother is a Christian. Now, that in itself is not something so extraordinary these days. There are so many mixed backgrounds, but there was nothing neutral about either of them. These were not neutral identity people. My father came from a family that was convinced that they had the last word on culture, on Urdu poetry, on inheritance, on an understanding of music. My mother came from a family where her mother believed that you had to be saved by Jesus Christ, otherwise you are going to burn in hell. So we had this childhood where, one was never conscious about anything. There was this Muslim side to the family, there was this Christian side to the family, and then along the way we were celebrating Diwali and Holi because that's what we did in India. We sort of did all this. But at the same time, there was something quite, now I recognize that there's something quite unique about if somebody says the typical Indian questions, what is your caste? You sort of say nothing. Are you a Muslim? No, not actually. I'm this also. So where are you from? So, one can go on and on this. But anyway, so one grew up in this sort of without an awareness of any conscious identity. And then somewhere along the way, one had to engage with what was happening in India. And I was getting more and more involved with the fact that others were seeing me as a particular identity person. And that is how the sort of constructs of identity I started to understand what is happening within India as I became an adult. Along the way, I took a journey across India, which I've written about in a book, where I found remarkable people who did not fit in a stereotype of a particular identity. I'll just share a few examples with you. There is a community of painters in Bengal called the Patachitra painters who draw divinities, Hindu divinities on a scroll, and as they open up the scroll, they sing a song about it and they tell you the story. It's a sort of old folk art. And the fantastic part of it is they're all Muslims who say they're also Hindus. And similarly, India is the only place in the world probably where you have something called a Muslim goddess. In the Sundarbans, people worship a divinity called Bon Bibi, and they insist she's a Muslim and she's a goddess, she's a Devi figure. Similarly, you go to Rajasthan and there is a temple called Ramdeora, which is a very important temple. It's not an obscure temple, and it is Ramsa Peer for the Muslims and Baba Ramdev for the Hindus. And these are the sort of narratives of people who are fluid in their identities, which also exists in India. However, this is not what I'm going to talk about. As I have walked into the process of understanding how identities are formed, how nationalisms are perceived, the Indian that I am is that I get very upset with the idea of an India that celebrates power at the cost of defeating someone else. An India that talks about growth rates and GDP, that we are about to become a great superpower, that we are this huge market, because to my mind, you know, as we all grow into understanding life, one of the great lessons we learn is you lose the ego as an individual. You try to anyway. That's how you learn about better things in life. And we in India, through the media, through so many stories we now share with the world, we have given our country a big king-size ego of a country which is going to box another country. We are competing with China. We have already flattened out Pakistan. And that is an India that I'm very, very uncomfortable with. The India that I believe in is an India which is very, very compassionate, which cares about people who are so marginal, who are on peripheries all the time. And you know, and the kind of Indian that I am becoming, even as I'm growing older, is someone who cares about the little things, the little people, who realizes that it's not just about a career, that it's not just about a job, your own family. There are so many things happening in this country which engage us and which does not involve celebrating our greatness. Because the minute we start sort of declaring we are this great powerful people in the world, we actually diminish ourselves. It's something that makes us smaller in our whole vision, in our whole understanding of life, in our whole understanding in the scheme of things. Because when we talk about markets and we talk about growth rates, those are not going to be the great ideas of India. And I'm just going to tell you about a journey that I just recently made to Pakistan, where I had gone to attend the Karachi Literature Festival. I got a visa after years, and a journalist does not give up the opportunity to go there. So as I went to Karachi, which this is after a fair amount of hype here about hostilities, I went there and they started the literature festival with a dance drama called Tagore, where they recited his poetry, Where the Mind is Without Fear. And they also had a beautiful rendition of the bhajan, which was a favorite of M.K. Gandhi, Raghupati Raghav Raja Ram, Ishwar Allah Tero Naam, which is a bhajan that celebrates all religions and accommodates them within their faith. And this was happening in Pakistan at an opening ceremony of a festival. And even as the festival ended, there was curfew in Karachi. Many of the Indian visitors left under armored vehicles. We are talking about a very, very troubled country. And I'd been there after years and years, and I was sort of stunned when I realized that these are the values of India, which are so universal, that people still talk about. These are the things where we can reach out and we can touch people. We don't have to bully people. We don't have to impose our will on people. We don't have to impress people. We just have to be better. We have to get rid of the ego in our idea of the nation. We have to be compassionate to celebrate a world where, you know, we are sort of expanding, markets are expanding, malls are coming up. So India is headed for great things. India is also losing a lot of great values as we move towards that. And for me, the idea of an India has to be compassionate, it has to be kind, it has to be an India which is so aware that there are so many people who have nothing, and which reaches out towards that. Not in India, which sort of has this false pride and false ego. And so when I'm asked about the kind of Indian that I am, it would be an Indian who does not like to box identities into little boxes, or even does not like to see nationalism as boxed into a simple identity. It has to be an India which reaches out. I reach out, and as I grow older, I realize the value of compassion, the value of letting go of the ego in the individual. I believe the best way to see the nation also is to let go of the celebration of the superpower, but to celebrate our human values. Thank you very much.